amend by adding regulations to establish a site plan review process in all zoning districts for educational or religious use of a building or structure with a gross floor area exceeding 10,000 square feet, whether the building or structure is existing, extended, or new/constructed, and for educational or religious use of an existing, extended, or new surface parking area exceeding 10,000 square feet. City Council Paper 405, 2021, as amended. Number 2, Table of Intensity Regulations, Title 12, Chapter 16. To amend by adding requirements for minimal usable open space for public or nonprofit schools, City Council Paper 405 of 2021, as amended. Number 3, General Regulation, Obstructions, Title 12, Chapter 28, Sections 060. To amend the current provisions, City Council Paper 452 of 2021. The full texts of the proposed zoning amendments, City Council Papers 405, 2021, and 452, 2021, are available for public review on the City of Malden website and with the City Planner, Inspectional Services, 3rd floor, and the City Clerk, 2nd floor, City Hall, 215 Pleasant Street, Malden, Mass.
Thank you, Ken. Is the sponsor here? Is Craig Spatafora online?
For 452.
For Council Paper 452-2021. Councilor Spatafora is not on. I understand that Building Commissioner Nelson Miller will be presenting. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Yes.
Promoted Nelson to panelist.
He's here.
Is he on?
I'm here.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Miller.
I'm sorry, I must have missed what was said when I was being transferred over to a panelist.
No, we were calling for the paper sponsor, Craig, Councilor Spatafora, but he's not on. So I understand that you're going to be presenting the paper. Is that accurate?
For the obstructions ordinance?
Yes, Council
Yes.
Paper 452-2021.
Yes, I am.
Okay, you have the floor.
Michelle, you handed out the PowerPoint presentation to all the planning board members, is that correct?
Yes, it was emailed to them, yes. Do you,
Is that something you could share your screen and put it up, or would we rather just have everyone look at the
it's up to
handout?
you. Want me to share the screen? I'll get that.
So while Michelle's digging that up, as kind of a background to this ordinance, the obstructions ordinance is an ordinance that we have which regulates the location of things, whether it be fences or walls or bushes or trees on private property, primarily at the intersection of two streets. And I'm sure some of you have driven down some of the streets in the tighter neighborhoods and got to an intersection and had some kind of issue, either seeing down the street to see if there was traffic coming, or for pedestrian traffic or bike traffic to see someone coming from the other direction because there might be a tall fence or a tall wall that goes right out to the back of the sidewalk on the private property and blocks that view. So the reasoning behind this proposed ordinance change was really from a number of complaints that our department has received over the years regarding these situations where my staff would go out to investigate the complaints They would bring the criteria of the current ordinance we have. They would measure out the regulations of the current ordinance onto the sidewalk or the street. And we've never had a single situation that violated this ordinance. So it became pretty obvious that the numbers we've been using for this ordinance just don't work. The mayor's office was pretty involved in this and asked me to do some research into maybe some other cities and towns and do a little research in the city itself and find out, you know, what I thought the numbers should be changed to so that they actually achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve. So, Michelle, do you have that to share?
Yes.
It's just, you all have it. It's literally, I think, 4 or 5 slides. It's not too involved, but it's just something easier to explain with a picture in front of you than it is for me to talk about it.
Okay, hold on.
And while she's pulling that up, Mr. Miller, this includes automobiles, right? I see in the paper, it says it includes vehicles, but does that mean vehicles parked on someone's lot or vehicles parked at the corner, blocking the view?
It would govern anything on private property. Cars parked at the corners, that would all be regulated by the parking department. And I think for the most part, parking is not allowed at the corners anyways. So I think that's already covered by the laws that we have. So here you can see, I just picked a random street in the city and I put onto our GIS pictorially what exactly the ordinance means. When you read it, it's not necessarily the clearest thing in the world, but this is what it means. You extend the curb line out into the street so that the 2 points intersect. And you can see that that's the right angle of the triangle is out somewhere into Pierce Street. From that point that's out in the street, you measure back each direction 10 feet. So the 2 legs of the triangle become 10 feet. Then you connect those 2 dots, and that triangle that you see there is the area or the zone where nothing's allowed to be, between the 2 heights. So this is a very good example. You can see by the gray area, that's the sidewalk. That zone lands within the sidewalk. So it doesn't even come close to the private property where there could possibly be a fence or a wall or a bush that's blocking the view. And this is exactly what we've run into numerous times with complaints from residents about dangerous intersections. We run into this situation where that zone lands out into the street, out into the sidewalk, and there's nothing we can do about it. The dangerous situation continues to exist. So what I did was took some numbers from some other cities and towns and kind of played around with them to see what they meant to our ordinance. And it's a very simple change, as you can see there. The wording of the ordinance really doesn't change at all. All we're changing is that distance from 10 feet to 25 feet. The items, the locations, all that is exactly the same as it was before. It's just basically making those 2 arms of the triangle longer than they are right now. So if Michelle scrolls down, you can see what that means. So now that 25 feet from that same point extended backwards, when you connect those 2 dots, you can see that corner of that piece of private property would be the zone where you couldn't have anything within that line of sight. That line of sight is when you're in your car and you come to the end of Nolan Street and you're trying to look down Pierce, there's a certain height off the ground that, you're sitting in your car and you want to be able to look down and see a person, a bike, a dog, a kid, whatever, coming at you. So that corner of that piece of private property would have to have a fence that is below that distance that's stipulated in the ordinance. And I found one of these in the city. If Michelle can scroll to the next slide, this is what you end up having. this isn't necessarily that property, but this is what that property would kind of look like if they were to put a fence up, where you have a full-size fence, around most of the property. And then when you get to the corner, it drops down and you can have that line of sight going down the street either way. This is a lot more common than you would think. The city of Melrose has an ordinance that's very much like this. And if you drive around, and Melrose has a lot of neighborhoods and properties that are obviously very much like Malden's. And you see these situations a lot at the intersection of two streets. And I believe, and maybe Michelle can correct me, when Michelle was doing her work for her planning recommendation for this, she actually went back to our old ordinances to find out when this was changed, and she'll have the date better than me, but it was sometime in the 70s. And I believe, Michelle, was the distance previously 35 feet and they changed it to 10? Is that accurate?
Yes, the original ordinance was written with 30 feet, and within a year, they changed it to 10. So 77, when we first adopted the ordinance, it was 30 feet. In 78, it was amended to 10, the current distance.
So this is really the simple change, that ordinance. There was a second portion of the ordinance that I had recommended a change to, which addressed the intersection of driveways and streets. What you all are addressing tonight is just the intersection of two streets, not driveways. There was a portion that you may have in front of you, which addressed driveways, which the ordinance committee didn't want to move forward. They want to talk about that a little bit further and work on it before you guys get it. So tonight, you're just looking at this particular change for the intersection of two streets.
If I could, Mr. Chair, was there also, Nelson, can you speak to the other change that was made in committee that added language in regarding bike paths? Were you at that? That is what's in the staff report and the committee report, but could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, thanks for bringing that up. I didn't mention that because the changes that I made were in red, and that wasn't a change when I put it together. I believe it might have been Councilor O'Malley or Winslow wanted to add in that this also would be applied to at the intersection of streets and bike paths or recreational paths. So I think what they had in mind when they brought that up was obviously the bike trail and where it might come into contact with public streets and public property, and having people, provide the same ability coming down the bike trail to see both ways before they drive out and get themselves in trouble.
Okay, anything else to add, Mr. Miller?
Nope, unless there's any questions for me.
Yes, let me see who we have here. Councilor Sika.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nelson, this particular issue, is this going to help us with the problem that I have on the corner of Grant and Revere? Or are those people going to be grandfathered in, or are we going to be able to tell them they have to fix their fence?
Yeah, like any ordinance change, this isn't something we're going to drive around the city and make people start tearing things down. The idea is that as time goes on, fences fall down, fences get repaired, walls, bushes, trees, etc. We won't be able to tell someone they have to take their fence down and put it back, but the hope is that as time goes on, and believe it or not, we do actually see a lot of fences go up on a yearly basis and walls. As time goes on, obviously, then the problem ones would transition over to being in compliance. But no, we wouldn't ask anybody to tear anything down. We have in the past with live things like bushes. We have asked property owners to cut back bushes and things like that not only impede the sidewalk, but the line of sight for people driving down the street. But for the most part, that's a voluntary compliance on their part. Nothing we could really enforce.
So even if it's a safety issue and people can't see turn in the corner there's nothing that we can do. Our hands are tied.
we can ask them nicely and explain the, the hazards that go along with it, but generally speaking, an ordinance change, we can't go back in time and take away something that's been allowed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, next person, Councilor Linehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I basically had the same question. I have some very, very new and extremely dangerous ones in my ward around Glenwood and Summer that are driving me crazy. So I guess I'm frustrated to hear that even with a safety issue, can't do anything about it, but I think this is a good move to do this. And hopefully as that churn happens, we can be on top of it. So thank you for all the work that's gone into it.
Thank you. Patrick Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to the complaints that you've referenced, is there any actual data as to collisions in that correlation to the distance?
I don't think that's data that we would have. I certainly don't have it and didn't investigate it, as a reasoning behind the change. The only reasoning behind proposing this change was complaints from residents, and then the inability, the fact that we've never had this ordinance actually work. It's never applied to a single property we've gone out and looked at. So it was kind of a little bit of, looking at it and saying, well, there must be something wrong with it if it's never worked once.
Did we consider reverting back to the previous 30 feet? And why 25 feet? What did the other cities and towns have that led us to the 25 feet?
I saw 25 feet in most cities and towns. And honestly, I don't want to say it was arbitrary, but it was an attempt to not only mimic what people might be used to seeing in other cities and towns, but also achieving the objective without taking over too much of someone's private property. Ultimately, you could make it real cumbersome and say 50 feet, and nobody would have a fence. So the 25 feet seemed consistent with other cities and towns. And then when I applied those numbers to a few of the intersections through our GIS system, it seemed to work. It landed within what appeared to be a reasonable portion of the corner of their lots.
And you're able to extrapolate a meaningful increase in line of sight at an average intersection with this increase to 25 feet?
Yeah, because line of sight, when it's calculated through traffic engineering, the speed of the road comes into effect. So obviously the higher the speed, the greater the line of sight that's necessary. We're really talking about, for the most part, our inner neighborhoods where the speeds, I know, although they aren't always abided by, the goal is that those people will be traveling slower. So a much smaller line of sight is necessary to create a safe situation for someone to, be able to pull out into a street without getting hit.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ken Antonucci.
Mr. Miller, I said a question for you. So is there I know you mentioned that these problem fences or situations on the corners can't really be addressed because they're grandfathered in with this change, but is there a threshold or a trigger when someone pulls a building permit on the rest of the property that could trigger addressing those issues? Like basically bringing it up to, it's not really building code, it's zoning. I don't know if that's something that's possible.
Well, I mean, anything's possible. I think the question would be, is it reasonable? So, one issue is we don't issue permits for fences unless they exceed 7 feet in height. So for the most part, unless people call us to ask about the rules, fences go up without us even knowing it because there's no permit required. So to link something that doesn't require a permit to something that does require a permit, I don't know. I think it would take some thought into how exactly you would word that, and tell someone that they're going to remodel their kitchen, so they have to take their fence down.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out a way to get some enforcement out there.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, that's a difficult one,
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to, Mr. Miller, your point about we don't give out a permit for fences. So what's the mechanism going to be if I didn't need a permit before and I'm putting up my fence and I paid for my fence and now you're telling me to take down my fence? So is there any way that we can get to be able to at least educate people that are going to be putting up fences, or even if it's a no-cost permit, so they get what the requirements are?
Yeah, another great question. So the lack of a requirement for a building permit for a fence which doesn't exceed 7 feet is building code, state law. So for us to change that is a process that I don't think we want to go through and have a low probability of success with. The good news is we do get an awful lot of phone calls from people asking about permits for fences. So, which is how I know a lot of fences go up, because we field a lot of phone calls. In a couple of months they'll start and they'll go all through to the fall with people asking about fence regulations and permitting and so on and so forth. So there'll be some education through that. Possibly some sort of education through the city website probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe something on the inspectional services page that doesn't just talk about fences, but maybe FAQ about things that require permits and things that don't, and that's somewhere we could make people aware of this regulation. But inevitably, we're going to have situations where people just go ahead and put a fence up, and then we have to go there and tell them to take it down, or adjust it, not take the whole thing down, but adjust it to fit the ordinance. But I think some kind of notification to the public, either again through the city website, through our inspectional services page, or something like that, might be the best way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Ken Antonucci again.
Just another suggestion I just thought of, when I get my water bill every month, sometimes there's little, little info pieces of information in there, maybe include one with the water bill, I don't know, some education.
One question.
Thank you very much, Ken. Did you have another question, Ken? Okay, Michelle.
Yes, I had one other question. Nelson, do you think, you mentioned bike path, do you think this should actually say intersection of Northern Strand Community Trail, like to the C path? Is bike path too vague that people might, street is a street. We know what streets are. We can call the city engineer and find out what the city streets are. Do you think it's worth it to specify what type of bike path, or say recognized bike path, or are you really only talking about the official, Northern Strand Community Trail, where that intersects streets?
Yeah, so again, that wasn't my recommendation, so I don't want to really speak to the intention of it.
Okay.
But I think it's fairly obvious the intention was the bike trail, the only one we have. I don't think it would be a bad idea to clarify that, just in case there was some confusion to it. But again, I didn't, that wasn't my change, so I don't want to say what the reasoning behind it was.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Crowe, does anyone on the ordinance committee have any other questions for Mr. Miller?
I don't think so. I do see in the attendees that Councilor Winslow has his hand up, so he might be able to answer that last question.
Okay,
I wasn't sure if he was speaking for public comment.
yeah, I assumed he was doing for public, that he raised his hand for public comment, for in favor or opposed.
Okay,
Do you want to do the public hearing now?
Well, that's why I'm just getting people to see
Oh, right,
if
right.
they have any other questions for you or Mr. Miller. Does anyone on the planning board have any questions for Mr. Miller or Michelle? Ken Antonucci.
cutting my mic off. Sorry for the additional question, but we brought up the differentiation between a bike path or a bike lane versus the Northern Strand Trail. Just trying to think of it, Nelson, if you still had those same sight distances for the 25 feet, that's reasonable to think you'd still, you'd be able to see the bikes coming as well as everything else with the 25 feet, right? It wouldn't really require any kind of increase to that 25-foot dimension.
I don't think so. And I think most people using the bike path, whether they're walking or riding a bike or whatever they're, riding, I don't think they come to the intersection of streets and rip right across, hopefully. So for the most part, what you're probably talking about with the bike path is people's ability to see, people and other things coming down the sidewalks, so they're not riding into each other. And then obviously some improved sight distance to the vehicles, that are coming down. A car has to kind of edge out into the street a little bit to be able to look down far enough to pull out, whereas a person riding a bike doesn't really need that same distance to see down the street. So,
assuming they stop before they get to the street, like you said.
oh, well, yeah,
Yeah.
I can't vouch for that, but
Yeah.
that's what they do.
Thanks.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Miller? Michelle, you don't have anything else?
No,
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Miller?
No, that's it. Thank you for the time.
Very good. At this point, then, we will look to take anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition. I see Craig on, so let me go to the sponsor first, and then we'll go to Councilor Winslow right after. Do we have to do something special to
no,
promote?
just alone to speak.
Where did Craig go? Allow her to talk. Did that get it?
He needs to unmute.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you were saying, Mr. Chairman, yes to Michelle or yes to me. So thank you, Council Craig Spatafora, 75 Elm Street. I am just speaking in favor of this petition. I think it's something that's long overdue. It's I don't want to say a loophole, but something that we probably should have looked at before. I do not want to take all the credit for being the sponsor. I was just happen to be the chairman of ordinance. Mr. Miller was actually the one to do a lot of research and put the paper before us. And we debated this issue in ordinance and a lot of great discussion. I don't think any of the councils had any opposition against it. There was some just discussion about adding the bike lane as well as maybe the length. But there was various examples that Nelson, Mr. Miller, was able to show us. It does actually fall in line with our surrounding communities that have a similar instance in terms of this requirement. The one question I do have for Mr. Miller is, Mr. Miller, if somebody's just playing off the ability to revisit a fence, if somebody's putting a pool in, they're required to have a fence. At that point, would be able then to put that reuse the new ordinance to say to them at that point, you have a fence up, but we want you to adjust it under the new ordinance, or no?
So the guidelines for a fence around a pool, obviously, are building code also, and then amended once again through our ordinances. So a person putting a fence up would have to have a fence that complied with the code for swimming pools. And if for some reason it was in their front yard or at a portion of their property at the intersection of two streets, they'd have to plan it so that
Yeah.
it could fall outside of that magic triangle that I just showed you. Using that particular property as an example, the pool would have to land outside of that triangle, so that the fence could be the proper height to comply with the building code.
Also, yeah, I don't want to certainly go down the rabbit hole, but I was just trying to figure out a way to clean up some undue properties that we would like to get to. But I certainly support this and look forward to the debate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Counselor. And Counselor Winslow. Counselor Winslow, are you still seeking to talk?
We go. All right, here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. No, I just wanted to speak in support of this, both as a, as a motorist, as a pedestrian, and as a cyclist. I think it's very good. We have seen more and more fences go up, and particularly they tend to be nowadays these vinyl fences that are solid versus picket fences of old, or even chain link fences. So it's certainly, I appreciate Nelson Miller's proactive on this. So that's supportive. Just a few things. I do think it is good to have definitely the Northern Strand Trail. And, we anticipate there might be some other trails like the Spot Pond Brook Greenway, and perhaps things along the Town Line Brook and other things. So there may be other paths that come up. So I think it would be good just to be a little bit more broad, but right now it's primarily the Northern Strand Trail. And I know there have been some fences that have been issues there. Those are actually been illegal fences. So some of them come down, some of them are still out there. But it is an issue for that. And I mean, and just in general, I know early on when we did some plotting of pedestrian bike accidents in the city for the bike trail, it was interesting. There were clusters around places like, if you're familiar with Malden Mills on Eastern Avenue, there was a cluster of crashes there. So you did see that places where there were obstructive views, there were more collisions for bikes and pedestrians. So it is helpful to, not, to have clear corners. So I definitely supportive of it. Thank you very much. Great.
Counselor, before you leave, can
Yep.
you identify yourself and name and address? for
Okay. Yeah, this is Counselor Steve Winslow, Ward 6 City Councilor, 83 Jacob Street in Malden. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have Counselor Spatafora with his hand up again.
No, I think that's an accident, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
And Counselor, while I have you, I think you said where you live, but could you repeat where you live, just for the record?
Yeah, it's 75 Elm Street, Malden, Mass, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman. I didn't need to raise my hand again. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's see, is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? Anyone else to speak in favor? Michelle, do you have anything to read in favor?
No.
Okay, and I don't see anyone looking to raise their hand and speak, so at this point, I declare that part of the hearing closed. The next portion is those that would like to speak in opposition to this council paper. Anyone in opposition, please raise your hand. Michelle, do you have anything to read in opposition?
No.
Very good. Not seeing anyone that would like to speak in opposition, declare that part of the hearing closed. Michelle, would you take us through your staff report, please?
Yes, first I will note, for everyone's reference, the planning board is well aware. This is a petition made by the city council, and the planning board is holding this joint public hearing in accordance with our local ordinance. The planning board will make an advisory recommendation to the full city council regarding this amendment. The city council will then determine whether or not to ordain it. So again, this is just for an advisory recommendation from the planning board. You heard the basic purpose and history of the current ordinance. It's a safety provision. It regulates structures, landscaping, and parked vehicles that are located on property at the intersection of two streets, which may obstruct views of traveling vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. I previously talked about the history of the ordinance. mentioned that, so we're essentially going back to the original or similar to the original version of the ordinance from 77. Won't repeat any of this, was already discussed at length by Nelson Miller. In terms of applications and exemptions, the amended ordinance will apply to new structures and existing structures on existing lots unless exempt by state law as a pre-existing non-conforming use or structure by our local ordinance, or as the subject of a building or special permit issued prior to the first publication and notice of the public hearing for this amendment, which was January 21st, 2022, or is on land part of an approved and endorsed approval not required or definitive subdivision plan. The effective date of the ordinance would be the council's vote to ordain the amendment. The standard of review for the planning board is that your review and recommendation should be directed by substantive planning objectives, community need, and general welfare. The recommendation is that the planning board recommend to the city council approval of the amendment as submitted. And this
Okay,
would be, I should clarify for the record, as modified by ordinance committee on December 21st, 2021. You all have a copy of that. I forgot to mention that the ordinance committee report is dated December 21st, 2021. That's where the bike path language was added, and the other provision that Nelson Miller referenced was deleted. So it is as written in the staff report. If it's ordained, or this is how I'm recommending, you recommend it be moved forward. Thank you.
okay, does anyone have any questions for Michelle on her recommendation and the staff report? Does anyone from the ordinance committee have a question for Michelle? Okay, very good. Then is there a motion? Ken Antonucci.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve recommendation of staff to approve the amendment as submitted.
To recommend approval.
So recommend approval
To recommend approval.
as submitted.
Yes.
Approval to ordinance as submitted
To city council.
by city council. Okay, and let's see, is there a second for that motion?
Hand up, yeah, how do you do the hand up? I'll second that motion.
Okay, Eric McCush seconds the motion.
Shall I do a roll call vote?
Yes.
Ken Antonucci,
Yes.
Diane Shuha,
Yes.
Patrick Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Tawadich Deborah Salassi,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Eric Henry,
Yes.
Eric McCush,
Yes.
Henry Susi,
Yes.
Charles Iobin.
Yes. So the planning board will make a recommendation to the city council approving this paper 452-2021 as submitted.
Yes.
Okay, very good then. The next item we're gonna take up is council paper 405. Just like to make a public announcement that Ken Antonucci from the planning board and Eric Henry from the planning board will not be participating in this discussion or vote. Thank you. So, I know Councilor Winslow's out there. Councilor Winslow, would you like to speak to the paper as a sponsor? Councilor Winslow.
Okay, here we go. Guess maybe you can maybe see me, maybe hear me now. All right, so
Oh,
so this, you ready for me, Chuck?
Add this for the record, please.
So Stephen Winslow, Award 6 Counselor, 83 Jacob Street in Malden. So just as the staff memo points out, this is a paper that has been to a joint hearing before. There were a lot of comments. This is to look at putting in place a site plan review process for educational religious uses. And there were a lot of comments, back the original paper that was proposed called for basically setting up a separate process with this site plan review. I think a key staff comment from legal department and the staff was that we should not set up a whole separate site plan review process as like we've done with the Malden River, that we should have really look at having the zoning board of appeals be the primary process. So this paper worked to kind of thread the needle. Under the Dover Amendment, we can't have special permits and related to the religious and educational institutions, but that state law does allow us to have some reasonable conditions on such things as building density, open space, parking, and other things. So this revision was took into account the initial staff report and legal recommendations. And we went back to the Rules and Ordinance Committee, made amendments. And I think a key thing that came out of the review process the first time through was generally, Michelle pointed out that I think there's 8 basically provisions under the Dover Amendment that the city council can look at. The current zoning covered 7 of 8 of those provisions. And we did point out that it was basically sort of silent on open space. So one of the things that the council looked at, and I did some analysis of what exists in terms of open space at existing schools. And so one of the additions from what went through back in October was to recommend that there be 15 square foot of open space per student. So just focusing on that, there's been some other developments. Key driving thing is the concern about Mystic Valley Charter School perhaps pursuing a development of school facilities in the heart of Maplewood Square. The mayor, myself, have worked with the charter school to come up with and the historical commission to come up with an agreement on how to approach that. And so, just a few things on that. That agreement is really looking at to, recognize that the charter school before this initiative was put out for public hearing, that they had already filed for demolition permits. So definitely now I would be supportive of the staff recommendation that this apply prospectively. So that's one key thing. And then just related to the open space, that I am supportive of the comment that applied to occupancy, that it focused basically on the building. So if a building is proposed and can occupy so many students, then that would be what the open space requirement rather than the school. So, and then just related to site plan review, I know the staff comments continue to raise concerns about site plan review. And I mean, this did not come out of nowhere that this was pursued. We had, we basically talked to some outside counsel, as well as, City Solicitor Fallon. And there has been an opinion by the Attorney General's office about a similar type of situation in Canton, the town of Canton. And essentially, the town of Canton has a site plan review that is run by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so it does, and at least the Attorney General's 2016 opinion, and that it says this, I'll just read from that opinion. It appears reasonable for the town to use a limited site plan review as the process by which it regulates the bulk and height of structure, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking and building coverage requirements for statutorily protected uses. So, so this is, I guess the Attorney General's office recognizes that, under the Dover Amendment, the state law that covers this, we can set reasonable conditions. Some of those are set by ordinance, but you have to have some process where you look at whether you're complying with those ordinances or not. And if people are varying, what's reasonable variances from that. So this is, so that is why this proposal continues to have a site plan review element to it, so that that at the time a building comes through, that if there is variances requested, that there would be a site plan review process triggered. So that's just, we went a long way in responding to the legal comments from both, the city solicitor and the staff. But I think the, to the extent that this is a substantial educational religious use, it makes sense to have some level of site plan review so that we can look at those 8 conditions. If a proposal meets those the requirements of our ordinance, then it could be done by right under the Dover Amendment. If there are variances that are seeking to change what we consider reasonable provisions on the ordinance, that would be open up the site plan review process. So that is I appreciate the analysis of our legal counsel and staff. And I think I say generally supportive of that. I do, would follow up with my fellow counselors as this goes back to rules and ordinance to discuss whether we would do anything. I do certainly support the making sure there is open space requirements for particularly educational institutions. That we do have, if institutions do not have some open space on their land, they end up putting a burden on city parks. So I think it's a fair and reasonable condition, and we're not asking those institutions to do anything more than that they're already doing in some instances, and that they are that the city does itself. So that's happy to answer more questions, but that's just kind of an overview of this second revision. Like I say, it's trying to thread some needles, and I can say there's a bit of varying legal opinion about the site plan review. So I certainly understand that the staff and legal staff has different things. So that's my comments.
So, Counselor, can you expand on that? So you've said that the Mass Attorney General supports the town of Canton. What's your belief of what the Malden City Solicitor's opinion is?
So I just say, there's this August 23rd, 2016, Attorney General's opinion, and Attorney Generals would review, ordinances and that type of thing. So I just say, as an attorney myself, attorneys can have different opinions. And so I think, I understand it's the Dover Amendment is a substantial state law that does restrict, I think our city solicitor looks at more court precedent. Attorney General's office opinion is maybe less persuasive, but it is something that is a basis of why we put something together. And I think it's, like I say, it would be something that I would like to discuss with the Rules and Ordinance Committee. But I say that, there is, some basis. The question is, the law does allow us to have reasonable conditions on religious and educational institutions, though we can't do that through a special permitting process. So,
what would you say the city solicitor's opinion is?
So I think the city solicitor opinion is that even this revised version is still too burdensome potentially. So that's that is the opinion that is there. I think it's a question. As I say, I've been a lawyer and I've been a client. Ultimately, lawyers provide opinions. Clients make decisions about those opinions. And, being a lawyer, there are, the law is not, at times there's ambiguity in the law, and you guide yourself as best you can based on legal precedent and the law, and that there can be different opinions from that. So I think it's, I understand, and I have a lot of respect for Solicitor Fallon, but like I say, I'd like to, also have the council discuss that, and whether there's, how we as a city give input, particularly if people are, I do, this acknowledges the input we've had from staff and the city solicitor that we should put into ordinance the reasonable conditions that should apply by law, and not do it through a more arbitrary site plan review. And that's why the open space requirement is part of this. I guess the question is whether you go beyond that and have, a site plan review committee provide input to the zoning board of appeals. It's not setting up truly a separate process. It's setting up a committee that would give some advice from the city to the zoning board of appeals, which that could just happen through, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a regulatory process. It could just be a matter of policy when those things up, and it might just happen spontaneously when things come up. So that's what we have to discuss maybe a little bit more at the council. But like I say, I think it's, like I say, I wouldn't I started down this path. It's been a long time coming. But, I do think it is having gone through the process to know what we can and should be prepared to as, these type of things come up. I believe in the past there was, a religious use that we did do some updating of the zoning. I think Michelle's more familiar with that. So I think it is good to, know that, our educational institutions do at times expand, and we should be clear about what we expect, and that, following the strictures of the Dover Amendment. But, so I think that's it. But yeah, I could say that it is, I think it is, like I say, that Dover Amendment allows us to put reasonable conditions into place. And I think these are reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Michelle, are we expecting to take 2 votes on this paper, or 1 vote that encompasses both components?
I would recommend that it is all in one paper, so you have the proposed amendment to establish site plan review, and also part of that paper, the proposed amendment to establish dimensional controls. I would recommend that you take 2 separate votes, unless whoever makes the motion is going to be making a motion that includes both papers. I think it might be easier to separate them, and then the recommendation, I can make one recommendation, but just on the off chance the vote is different on both parts of the paper, I'm not sure, so,
Okay, so we'll just keep an eye on that when the
yeah, we'll
motion
keep
tends to be
an eye
made.
on that, right, and we can, discuss, Council Winslow basically gave an overview of both parts of the paper.
Right,
But yeah, I do want to make sure we note there were 2 different parts. You could approve both parts, you could approve one, disapprove, recommend. Again, this is an advisory recommendation, so yeah, we want to just keep an eye on that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Councilor Winslow? Does anyone on the Ordinance Committee have any questions they would like to ask? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone on the planning board that has questions for Councilor Winslow? I don't, I don't see anyone asking anything. My only question with Councilor Winzo, provided some guidance on is, my understanding is that Malden City Solicitor thinks there's still issues with the proposal on the site plan review portion. And that's my only concern, and that I'm not in favor of recommending to the city council that we approve that piece. But I am more open about the open space portion, and what the requirements proposed on that are. But if no one else has any other questions. Okay, then we'll go to those that would like to speak in favor of this petition. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of this petition for paper 405-221? Anyone in favor? I'm not seeing any hands put up. Michelle, do you have anything to read in favor?
Yes, I do. If you could just give me a minute, I want to make sure I have an address here. Okay. So I do have one letter. It is from Mary Beatrice, and I believe her address is 49 Barker Road, Malden. This is a handwritten letter. It was received on January 10th, 2022. And it reads, "Wait a minute, what is going on in Maplewood Square? I'm a lifelong resident of Malden, concerned about what is happening. The charter school has recently acquired 18-24 Lebanon Street, 28 Lebanon Street, and 17 Columbia Street. The charter school is looking to build a school in the heart of Maplewood Square with 1,900 students. This would have a devastating impact on the community, the businesses, and the traffic. Right now, there are 4 schools in the street. On the street, the Linden School, 710 students, the charter school, 1629 students, the Settlement School, 1,169 students, and Malden High School, 1,845 students. I grew up on Laurel Street. I was proud to be called a Maplewood girl. I lived across from the fire station, now owned by the charter school. I went to the Maplewood School, now the charter school. I remember going to the library, now owned by the charter school. I'm sad to say the Baptist Church and the Citizen Bank in Maplewood are now owned by the charter school. Let's do what's best for Maplewood Square. I love going to Maplewood Square. Then and now owned by local merchants. The square is old, but it's great." That was the letter I received.
So, I mean, I would take that as in opposition.
I believe that's in favor of the site plan review process.
Oh, okay, okay.
They're in favor of the zoning to,
Thank you for
Yes.
clarifying that. Okay, very good.
and that's all I had to
And
read.
that's all you have. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of this petition? Seeing and hearing none, declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to this council paper? Anyone in opposition? Michelle, do you have anything to read in opposition?
No,
Okay, so seeing and hearing no one who wants to speak in opposition, Declare that part of the hearing closed. Michelle, can you take us through your staff report and recommendations, please?
Yes, again, this is a proposal for zoning amendment. The planning board is convening a joint public hearing with the city council as required, city council ordinance committee as required by our zoning ordinance. You heard from the council sponsor, Councilor Winslow. I gave you this little procedural outline as to what's happened since the first public hearing on October 13th. I also gave you a copy of the original version of the paper that the board and ordinance committee discussed at that public hearing. The board did make an advisory recommendation to the council. That's via correspondence dated October 14th, 2021. You have a copy of that as well. It included obtaining the opinion of the city solicitor regarding the legality of the amendments regarding educational and religious uses under state law, 40A Section 3. The city solicitor, Catherine Fallon, provided an opinion via memorandum to the city council ordinance committee dated November 16th, 2021. That's attached. I'm not sure if you want me to read that into the record or not. But you do have it, so this whole thing is referenced, incorporated into the record. City Council Ordinance Committee met in November 16th. At this meeting, the committee, the city solicitor, and I discussed the amendments, the planning board recommendations, and the city solicitor's opinion. Sponsor Winslow revised the amendments. The ordinance committee recommended and filed the revised amendments with the city council in December. That is the paper you have before you, paper 405/2021 as amended. Because the changes appeared to be substantive, the city council did refer this revised amendment to planning and ordinance committee for a new public hearing. That's the public hearing we're holding tonight. We did give new notice in accordance with state and local ordinance. The city solicitor did provide additional guidance as a result of review of these revised amendments with myself. Her additional guidance is incorporated into this report as notes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Also, I want to note that the city solicitor's November 16th, 2021 memorandum remains relevant to the current revised amendments. And as noted above, it's attached to this report. So you all heard from the sponsor, you already heard the summary of the proposed amendments. They'll apply to educational and religious uses. This would be change of use, extension of existing buildings, or construction of new buildings with a gross floor area greater than 10,000 square feet. It would also apply to extension of existing or construction of new surface parking areas exceeding 10,000 square feet for religious use or educational use, and this would apply to property in all zoning districts. This would establish a site plan review process. I think we'll focus on the site plan review part of it first before we get into the other part of it. So currently, site plan review is proposed. There is no site plan review for educational religious uses. Educational religious uses are allowed by right in all zoning districts. Surface parking areas are not defined by our zoning ordinance. So there's no category, there's no definition for surface parking area. So if there's parking that's related to a building that's located on a property, that is subject to certain dimensional requirements and parking requirements, landscaping, screening, etc., but it's considered part of the principal use. You do have standalone parking lots, but that's an off-site parking facility. So that's not what this paper is intended to regulate. It's intended to regulate a parking lot that goes with the building. So again, we don't have a category or definition for that. That's something to consider. In terms of dimensional controls and parking requirements, educational and religious uses must comply with applicable dimensional controls, parking, loading, and screening requirements. We already have those in our zoning ordinance, or they may seek a variance. So let me see. There are some outstanding concerns regarding establishing this site plan review for educational and religious uses. As I mentioned, we have the city solicitor's memo that details some of these concerns, and many of these issues that we're going to talk about were discussed at the first joint public hearing in October. So the general concern is that the legality of the proposed site plan review ordinance to regulate these so-called Dover Amendment uses, specifically religious and educational. Also, there are concerns with inconsistencies and conflicts with the proposed site plan review process, conflicts and inconsistencies with city and state zoning laws and other city ordinances. The city solicitors added some additional guidance here. I'm not sure if you want me to read this into the record or it's.
Yes, please.
Okay, so first, she notes, it's important to note the applicability of what can be regulated under the Dover Amendment, Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 3. It reads, provided, however, that such land or structures may be subject to reasonable regulations concerning bulk height of structures in determining yard sizes, lot areas, setbacks, open space, parking and building coverage requirements. Our zoning already regulates these criteria. Also, she notes, please keep in mind that regulations, even if properly procedurally enacted, can be struck down as unreasonable. If the regulation is too restrictive, thus preventing a use permitted under the Dover Amendment, it will not survive legal challenge. Religious and educational uses are permitted by law. That includes new and expanded uses. An ordinance which attempts to regulate these uses is unlawful. What is permissible is reasonable dimensional controls, again, which already exist in our current zoning. Important definitions, she notes, state law provides. What does as of right mean? What does a permit, who is the permit granting authority? Who is a special permit granting authority? Second, in terms of outstanding concerns, have to do with applicability, which is section B of the proposal. The city solicitor previously recommended that the following provision be included. The proposed ordinance does not apply to an application for a project or permit that complies with dimensional and parking requirements and requires no variance by Board of Appeal. She notes that these preliminary reviews and determinations are within the jurisdiction of the building commissioner. The third concern has to do with the section C, relationship to the building and occupancy permit. Per state statute, this ordinance or amendment would not apply to a building permit or special permit issued prior to the date of first publication of the notice of public hearing, which again was January 21st, 2022. Applications for permits that are in the processing stage when publication occurs are not protected. However, the city historically interprets, in consideration of a petitioner's good faith reliance on current regulations, the proposed amendments do not apply to applications filed prior to the first date of publication. The amendment proposes to use the date of posting of the city council agenda. This would be an earlier date than that provided by statute or by the city's historical extension of that exemption. So again, right now we look at the date of publication of the notice of hearing, and we historically extend it to applications filed prior to that first date. But the proposal would use an earlier date. The city solicitor recommends deletion of this section based on the following guidance. The phrase precondition of the issuance of a building permit conflicts with regulatory and statutory processes in place. Whether or not to grant a permit is determined by the building commissioner. This language is too broad. Also, regarding using the posting of the city council agenda as a threshold date, as to applicability of the ordinance, if enacted, a section can be included to specify the ordinance shall not apply to applications filed prior to the first date of publication of the hearing notice. Posting of the city council agenda is not historically or statutorily used as an effective date for applicability purposes. She notes, as explained to the Rules and Ordinance Committee, this city has historically not applied zoning amendments to any applications filed or in the processing stage when publication occurs. This includes applications for permits filed. That's a repeat. First publication again was January 21st. Other concerns have to do with the site plan submission criteria, which are listed in section D. These provisions appear to be unnecessary to a point of possibly being considered unreasonable. They require submission materials to include determination to allow determinations, to include information to allow determination, review, and consideration by the committee of areas already regulated by existing zoning regulations, so specifically dimensional controls, lot area setbacks, yard sizes, building coverage, bulk and height, and parking requirements, number of spaces, loading bays, snow storage, bicycle parking, landscaping. So our zoning already regulates those areas, but this amendment proposes to allow this committee to have some regulation of those areas. Also, some of the criteria have to do with areas already regulated by other existing ordinances, so not zoning, solid waste ordinance, sign ordinance. Other concerns have to do with the site plan review committee. It's, the purpose and role of an independent site plan review committee is unclear and in potential conflict with existing ordinances. Because the committee appears to usurp established role and authority of other city officials and or boards and commissions. Committee composition is not related to matters to be regulated by the proposed ordinance. Members are not required to have any particular expertise regarding technical areas proposed to be considered by site plan review, with the exception of the strategic economic development staff person. Most members, 3 of the 5, are elected officials. Also, committee operations provisions appear to regulate and establish procedures for the Board of Appeal, not for this committee. In terms of the review schedule and the notice provisions, sections F and G, the city solicitor notes many of the recommended revisions were not made. She notes section F adds an additional public hearing process inconsistent with that required by zoning law. The recommendation was made previously to delete the section regarding notice because it's an attempt to wedge a separate public hearing process which does not exist at law. It would fall under the statutory public hearing process and timeline provided by state law. Also, the site plan review should occur in tandem with the Board of Appeals hearing process and by the Board of Appeals, as conducted and determined by the Board of Appeals. And then finally, outstanding concerns regarding site plan review criteria, similar to the site plan submission criteria we discussed previously. So these provisions appear again to be unnecessary to a point of possibly being considered unreasonable. They require review and comment by the committee of matters and criteria already under the purview and authority of the building commissioner, the Board of Appeal, city staff, other boards and commissions such as the DPW Commission, Traffic Commission, Board of Health, Sign Design Review Commission, City Engineer, City Council, Licensing Board, a license board, with expertise and which administer existing permitting licensing regulations in the subject areas. Signs, solid waste, street layouts, on-street parking, traffic signal improvements, sidewalks, curb cuts, utility connections, park use permits. As proposed, the ordinance requires review and comment by this committee regarding other city permits and licenses the applicant may need or desire. These are already subject to review and approval by other boards and commissions per other ordinances, and existing ordinances already allow the opportunity for comment by city officials. City solicitor notes it was previously recommended deletion of this section. Notes criteria are already regulated under current zoning. So those were the comments specific to the establishment of the site plan review process. The memo from the city solicitor dated November 16th did have to do with the original paper 405/2021, but whereas many of the substantive concept of the paper is the same, to regulate certain uses protected by the Dover Amendment, that is why, as previously noted, it is still relevant. I won't read that into the record unless you want me to, otherwise it can be incorporated by reference into the record.
No, please incorporate by reference.
Okay, so again, the board did ask for a legal opinion as part of its recommendation to the council, so the council obtained it. This was the opinion. So you did not have this when you had the first public hearing in October. I received a copy of it. I was copied on this afterwards, so now you're formally receiving it now. So that is that. Do you want me to finish the recommendation?
Yes,
or-
please.
So in terms of application and exemptions, the amended ordinance would apply if approved to new lots, new buildings, new use and occupancy of existing buildings on existing lots, less exempt by state law or our local ordinance, the subject of a building or special permit issued before the first publication and notice of the public hearing, land part of an approved and endorsed approval not required, a subdivision plan, or by the express language of the amendment. We've just discussed that the city historically extends the exemption, and I am recommending language, if this moves forward, that be adopted or ordained, as opposed to this alternative exemption date. I will note that there are 3 applications for demolition permits that were filed prior to the first date of publication of the notice of public hearing regarding this amendment. They have to do with 1224 Lebanon Street, filed on September 22nd. 2021, 28 Lebanon Street filed on September 22nd, 2021, and 17 Columbia Street filed on September 23rd, 2021. Those are all proposals for educational use of those properties, so those I would recommend would be exempt. I would recommend that the board recommend language be included to extend the exemption to these. They were filed prior to the date of first publication. The effective date of the amendment is the date of the council's vote to ordain the amendment. The council must act on the amendment within 90 days after this hearing closes. Otherwise, a newly advertised public hearing must be held. So if the public hearing closes tonight, the final date for action is May 10th, 2022. So again, the planning board will be making an advisory recommendation to the city council. The city council then can discuss and vote on it immediately upon receiving the recommendation, or as traditionally happens, they refer the planning board recommendation to ordinance committee, and ordinance committee discusses it and makes a recommendation back out to the full council. Either way, the full council would need to take action prior to 90 days, so prior to May 10th. Otherwise, we would need to hold another hearing. So the standard of review, you want me to move forward with this? Or
Yes, please.
is your review and recommendation of the proposed zoning changes should be directed by substantive planning objectives, community need, general welfare. The planning recommendation is that the planning board recommends to the city council disapproval of the amendments of title 12.12 as proposed. So that is the proposal for site, the part of 405, paper 405, 2021, that seeks to amend and establish a site plan review process. I will note that if the amendments are ordained, the board should recommend that the ordinance would not apply to applications filed for a special permit or building permit filed prior to the date, filed before the date of first publication of the notice of public hearing. And if this is, so the recommendation is that you recommend disapproval, but that you also recommend these additional provisions in case they do move forward with it. Which they don't have to follow your recommendation, that also the following language be included to title 12.12 if it's ordained. This ordinance shall not apply to an application for permitting that complies with dimensional controls and parking requirements. It requires no variance by Board of Appeal. So looking at the staff report, that would be number 1, 3, and 4. That would be my recommendation regarding the part of the paper regarding title 12.12, site plan review.
So 1, 3, and 4.
Right, if you're going to take two separate votes.
Yes, I think we should
separate-
take 2 separate votes so we don't have any confusion
Okay.
with the clarity. So for the planning board, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a vote on the site plan review portion of the paper 405-2021. And that's also referred to as title 12.12. Does anyone have any questions for Michelle on her staff report? Okay. Does anyone from the City Council Ordinance Committee have any questions about anything Michelle read on her staff report?
Looks like we're good.
Okay, very good. Just want to give you guys an opportunity. Then if there's no questions on Michelle's recommendation and staff report, is there a motion from the planning board? So Patrick Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to any amendments to Title 12.12, I would make a motion to recommend to the Ordinance Committee disapproval of the amendments. The basis for my motion is that I find, I credit the opinion of the city solicitor, particularly that that we cannot rely on the Attorney General's opinion related to the Canton Town bylaw because our zoning laws are different than theirs, so it's not comparable, it's distinguishable, and that there are conflicts in our existing zoning ordinance to provide for a site plan review for this particular use. I do also include in my motion to include the language as recommended by the planner related to conditions 3 and 4 regarding the applicability of any amendment if the city council were to ordain.
Okay, so just to make sure, Michelle, that you get what you need.
Yes.
Patrick's made a motion to recommend disapproval of Title 12.12 as proposed and add the inclusion of the language associated with the dates of this, which the
3 and 4.
3 and 4, which apply to people who filed already. Are you all set with that?
Yes, so this is the motion is to recommend disapproval of the amendments of section of Title 12.12 and to include the recommended additional language in 3 and 4. One has to do with the applications already filed, and the other one would have to do with applicability.
Yes. Is there a second for Patrick's motion? Diane Chuha.
I'll second the motion.
Diane Chuha seconds. Thank you, Diane.
Okay, so a yes vote is to recommend disapproval. Roll call,
Yeah.
okay. Ken is not present. Diane Chuha,
Yes.
Patrick Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Tawadej Deborah Salassi,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Eric McCush,
Yes.
Henry Susi,
Yes.
Chuck Iovan.
Yes.
So that is 7. So you need a majority to make a recommendation, so we will make that recommendation.
Okay.
So you wanna,
Very good. Thank you.
we'll switch.
Yeah, if you could switch gears and onto the,
Yeah, so we'll go back to the part of the paper that has to do with open space requirements for public schools and nonprofit schools. As proposed, the amendment would establish open space requirements. This is new to the paper, so you did not hear, this was mentioned. It was mentioned as an idea, establishing open space requirements, but this was not part of the original 405. So you did not hear any proposed language or discuss any amendment directly at the hearing in October. So this is new. The proposed amendment would establish open space requirements as proposed. 15 square feet of open space per student would be required. In support of the proposal, Councilor Wenzel provided a spreadsheet of information. You all received a copy of that. It's entitled Existing Open Space of Schools in Malden. It includes a note that the square footage estimated was via Google Earth. Enrollment for Malden schools was based on the caps. For Malden Catholic, Cheverus, and Malden Mystic Valley Regional Charter School, actual enrollment from 2021. So you all received a copy of that. In terms of open space requirements for public and nonprofit schools, the current ordinance contains no open space requirements for public and nonprofit schools. We'll note the ordinance does not contain open space requirements for any institutional uses, any business or any industrial uses. Also, our ordinance does contain usable open space requirements in all districts. So for all those uses, which are all residential, that require open space, there is a set of regulations that are applicable. And they're listed here in the staff report. It's in section 12, title 12.16.080. They have to do with usable open space, dimensions of open space, where the open space can be located, et cetera. I won't read those, but those are here for your reference. So the one question, or I should say, in terms of concerns, this one off, I'm not sure what happened. Okay,
Did we notice?
that's fine, you can look at mine.
Okay, yep.
So, the mic is still on, so
Yep, that's
it
fine.
should still be good. So, in terms of these open space requirements, so, I asked Building Commissioner Nelson Miller for some assistance, with interpreting open space requirements. So he provided this information. Open space requirements for any use or building are not regulated by the Massachusetts State Building Code. Any metric may be used to determine open space, so number of students, size of building. It is recommended to use the occupant load, not the enrollment. So if you want to base it on the number of students, you would use the occupant load of the school building. That is regulated by the State Building Code, but it would include students and staff. So to find the student occupant load, the maximum number of students allowed in the building, you would combine the total occupant loads of individual spaces occupied by students. So he also notes to base open space requirements on the size of the school would not take into consideration different types of spaces within a school that might have varying layouts, occupant loads, and would not be an accurate way to determine the overall need of open space. So the proposed requirement, as I noted, is based, the sponsor provided, it's based on, the 15 is based on information provided by the sponsor. I will note this information appears to be preliminary, an estimate, and to ensure reliability should be verified and revised if necessary based on actual open space areas depicted on professionally prepared site survey plans of school properties. Again, it was based on Google Earth, the estimates for the sizes of the yards and plazas, et cetera. We just want to make sure the number is correct and accurate. Additional language is recommended to specify per student based on student occupant load. And I'll note it's unclear whether those existing regulations I just mentioned, usable open space requirements in all districts, are appropriate for schools, or maybe should be amended to provide regulations specific to schools. The city solicitor notes one concern and provided the following opinion. There are no open space requirements in our zoning for institutional, business, or industrial uses. So carving out zoning that only applies to educational uses could be challenged as an unreasonable attempt to regulate educational use permitted by law under the Dover Amendment. I will note, though, that as the sponsor had stated, open space is one of the dimensional controls listed in the Dover Amendment that we can regulate. We just don't happen to regulate it right now. So I will, you have the city solicitor's opinion, but I think the state law that says we could establish a reasonable regulation is also important to note, and that is what I'm basing my recommendation on. I understand the concern, but I think that it is worth it to try to move forward with that piece. The application exemptions are the same. It will only apply, the amended ordinance would, if approved, would apply to new lots, new buildings, new use and occupancy of existing buildings or existing lots, unless exempt by state law or a local ordinance, or is a subject of a building or special permit issued before the first publication notice of the public hearing, which again is January 21st, 2022, or is land part of an approved and endorsed approval not required in definitive subdivision plan, or the express language of the amendment. Again, there are these three applications. I won't read them again, but there are three: 12-24 Lebanon, 28 Lebanon, and 17 Columbia for educational use. They were filed prior, those applications for demolition permits were filed prior to the date of first publication of notice of public hearing on the amendment. So again, we're recommending language to extend the exemption to any applications filed prior to the first date of publication. Again, council must act within 90 days if the hearing closes tonight. So final date for action is May 10th, 2022, otherwise we need to hold a new hearing. The recommendation is that the planning board recommend, again, this is an advisory recommendation to the city council, that the planning board recommend to the city council approval of the amendment of title 12.16 as proposed, which are the dimensional controls to establish open space requirements for public and nonprofit schools. So approval of the amendment of title 12.16 as proposed in concept, subject to the following. A, modify if necessary based on actual open space areas depicted on professionally prepared site survey plans of the existing school properties. B, inclusion of the following additional language per student based on student occupant load. And C, to consider amendments to usable open space requirements in all districts to establish specific provisions that would apply to schools. At this point, you can only make recommendations to that section that was not advertised in the notice, so you would not be able to amend that section, even if you wanted to add some different provisions. That will need to come back as a new amendment if they choose to add language to that section. And then inclusion of the following language. If any amendments are ordained, this ordinance shall not apply to any application for a special permit or building permit filed prior to the date of first publication of the notice of public hearing regarding the ordinance, and actually just that's the only language you would need to include for that. So 2 and 3 apply to this portion of paper. The planning recommendation in items 2 and 3 apply to this portion of paper 405/2021.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, does anyone have any questions for Michelle? Anyone have any questions for Michelle? Okay, I see Patrick on the recommendation on the Title 12.16. Okay, Patrick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle, if I can just clarify, when you recommend approval in concept, my understanding in reading of the opinion from the city solicitor that Title 12.16 alone could be deemed unreasonable if not ordained in conjunction with other amendments to usable open space requirements in all districts in section 12.16.080. So because only Title 12.16 is before us, can we recommend approval of it?
Yes, my reading and my discussion with the city solicitor is we didn't actually discuss the usable open space requirements, that other provision. What we discussed was, and her concern is that because we don't have open space requirements for any other institutional uses, business or industrial, we're carving out a zoning regulation that only applies to educational. So she's thinking that might be challenged as an unreasonable attempt to regulate educational uses. So, for example, if we were going to have open space requirements that apply to all the institutional uses, religious facilities, what are the other ones? Schools, let me just get the others here. Club, lodge, daycare centers, hospitals. So if we were going to have open space requirements for all institutional uses, so we weren't just targeting the educational use, or we were going to look at, looking at business uses, establishing open space requirements for those, or industrial uses. So I think her concern was that we picked the one use category to establish the open space requirements. And I mean, I do hear what the concern is. It could be challenged as an unreasonable attempt, but as I noted before, and as she had noted, state law does say that you may subject, educational use to reasonable regulations, and out of those 8 criteria, bulk, height of structures, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking and building coverage. Open space is specifically called out in the state law. So I think based on that, as long as it's a reasonable regulation, that's why I think we should have, I say in concept, because if you do the site survey plans of all the schools that the sponsor listed, and maybe it's not 15 square feet, maybe it's 10 square feet per student, those are kind of, I think, rough estimates. So if that number 15 is wrong,
I think we could have an issue, because then it might be unreasonable. If the number really should be 10, or, you know, that I think is why I recommended we should, the council should have some more certainty with that number. That's why I said recommend in concept. If you're not, you don't have to do that. You certainly can, as proposed, it's 15. And if you're not comfortable with that, and it's fair, I mean, it could be challenged. You do have the opinion from the city solicitor that may be challenged. You can recommend disapproval of it. The council, again, can follow your recommendation or not. Clearly, they're hearing your concerns. We don't typically do that, make a recommendation in concept. I'm just not 100% comfortable with the number 15, because I'm not sure it's reliable or accurate. So that's why I stated it that way. I do support the idea of establishing open space requirement in concept, though, for educational uses.
And I tend to agree with you on all points. So I'm wondering how we can best, you know, I don't want to necessarily make a motion to disapprove it, because I do agree with the language that you're suggesting as it relates to educational uses, but I also think there should be a recommendation that they should consider looking into either creating or amending for other non-residential uses as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can recommend approval, you can recommend disapproval, you could make no recommendation. The point is you have to hold this hearing before they can move forward. So the hearing is what's required by statute. You could just make a recommendation that they do further review and research. You don't have to recommend in favor, or, you know, once or twice, I think we did do that. Although I think typically it is a disapproval, and you recommend what you think they should look at. So you can add whatever, you know, conditions or additional recommendations to the recommendation. You could, like I said, you could recommend just further review, you know.
Patrick, does that get at answering your question, or?
Yeah, it answers my question. Thank you.
I think I'm in a similar situation as you stated, Patrick. If we chose to recommend disapproval, I could live with that based on the opinion of the city solicitor. However, where the real question is, what's the right square footage? And where it is open space, and where it clearly says we can address open space if for educational institutions, I could go that way also. So it really comes down to the motion that someone wants to make from the planning board. Does anyone else have any other questions or want to confuse anything more than I just did? Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am prepared to make a motion to recommend to the city council disapproval of the amendment title 12.16 as proposed. However, also recommend that they research and consider professionally prepared site survey plans of existing school properties when considering open space requirements for educational uses. Also language research and consider including language per student based on student occupant load when considering open space requirements for educational uses. and research and consider amendments to usable open space requirements in all districts to establish specific provisions that would apply to schools with these recommendations.
Okay, do you have all that, Michelle?
Yes, I do. Do you want me to repeat it or?
Well, is it fair to say that it's the recommendation of staff for items 2 and 3, except that instead of recommending approval, we recommend disapproval?
Yeah, so I think that's correct. Right, so it's to recommend disapproval of the amendment as proposed and recommend A, B, and C.
Yes.
I believe that's correct.
That is correct. They just changed the language to reflect that we would be disapproving as
Right.
proposed, make it more applicable to what we're recommending they do going forward.
Okay, so it's a recommend to disapproval, but also recommend research and I think you said research and consideration of A, B, and C.
Right.
That was the phrase used, research and consideration.
And number 3.
And then number 3 as well, was that included?
Yes,
Patrick, is that included?
Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then number 3, if it's, okay. So 2, disapproval, plus the recommendation to research and consider A, B, and C, and then number 3 as well, include that language if any amendments are ordained.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Is there anyone that would like to second Patrick's motion? Eric McCush.
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
So Eric McCush has seconded it.
So that a yes vote is to recommend disapproval with the additional recommendations. This is for the open space requirements for public and nonprofit schools. So a yes vote is to recommend disapproval. Diane Shuha?
We have a counselor with his hand raised. Should we hear him first?
Right, but we're about to take a vote.
Okay, then yes.
We'll go to Councilor McDonald afterwards.
Okay.
Patrick Fitzgerald?
yes,
Tawada Geber Selassie?
Yes.
Patrick Hayes?
Yes.
Eric McCush?
Yes.
Henry Susi?
Yes.
Charles Iovine?
Yes.
So that is 7 to 0. That is a majority, so we will make that recommendation to the city council.
Yes. Thank you very much. Councilor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question. I wanted to make sure that I understand, since this will come back likely to the ordinance committee. And what I heard, I think you just do is agree with the city planner's analysis, but then not the recommendation that was derived from that analysis. So I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what's the basis for your disapproval here. Is it the factor of 10 or 15 square feet per student, or are there other factors involved here? I just didn't understand how you use the same analysis and got to a different result. And I want to make sure that we understand what the planning board's recommendation, where that recommendation is really grounded.
The recommendation is disapproval. I think it's driven largely over the fact that 15 square foot was based off Google Maps. It wasn't based off the actual plans and accurate plans and documents from that perspective. However, because this is a recommendation from the planning board to the city council, what we're also recommending is if you guys get this back and you research using the professionally prepared plans and address those 3 items that were identified. That if you're going to move forward with it, that's what we would recommend you do.
Okay, thank you.
So it's not closing the door totally on it, but it's saying the way it's written and submitted to us, we're not in agreement with. However, if you do pursue it, we recommend you follow these 3 items and how, inclusion of the person based on student load, base the actual open space area on professionally prepared site plans, and then consider putting this in all districts, not just educational districts.
Well, I didn't hear that. The third was, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, no, that's good. I thought it was item C.
Right, the third one was that you consider amendments to usable open space, an existing provision already there. Should that apply to this? Because it will. If you were to go ahead and ordain this as proposed, it will, all those open space requirements that apply to all districts, that whole section would now apply to this as well. And maybe it's okay, maybe those provisions are okay for this as well. I just wasn't sure because, they have certain dimensions and locations where the open space can be located and things like that. So you could go ahead and ordain it with 15 and everything would apply. But if you want to make changes to that section, it will need to come back for another hearing.
Okay, but it's item C on the staff report, right?
It's item C, right, but
And that's what Patrick proposed.
Right, but
Right.
it doesn't, I heard confusion. The city solicitor said you should consider open space for all these other uses. That's not what this is. This is existing regs that apply to everything already, are also gonna apply to schools if now schools are required.
Oh, okay,
So
yes,
there's 2
yes.
different, I think there was just a little confusion. There's 2 different issues here. Do you want these existing provisions to apply to schools? And then city solicitor's opinion was, you should consider open space for all these other uses.
Okay,
That's a little bit different. I didn't hear that as part of Patrick's motion. I heard, him.
okay, well, let me ask Patrick before we go down.
Yeah, I want to
that path.
clarify, yeah.
Patrick, can you clarify what it is you were intending?
I actually
thought
did
you
intend
were
both.
intending Item C.
Yeah, I did intend both. As Michelle stated, it is 2 separate issues. It's if there's going to be an additional open space requirement for educational use, it will be included in 12.16-080. But I also agree with the city solicitor's recommendation. And I thought they made that clear that they consider either creating or amending open space requirements for all non-residential uses as well.
Okay, that part I didn't get in your motion, so do you want to amend that motion? I hadn't included that. Consider, you were saying you also want to the council to consider open space requirements for all other non-residential, you said.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Eric McCush, would you second that stipulation also? Yes,
I will.
see. Yes,
Okay.
okay, so.
So you've amended the motion, so it's still to recommend disapproval. It's still to recommend research and consideration of A, B, and C. It's still to recommend inclusion of the language in 3, but now it also includes consider open space, what did you say? Consider adoption of, or consider creation of open space requirements for all other non-residential uses.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the part that I missed. I'm sorry, actually, I think you did say that when you were talking, and I just think I don't repeat it. I didn't repeat it, so
Okay.
that was amended. Do you want to do
Yes,
another vote?
if we could go
Okay.
through the vote again.
Okay, so this is amended, the vote yes is to disapprove, but to make all those other recommendations as well. So Diane Shuha,
Yes.
right, Patrick Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Tawanda Geber Selassie,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Eric McCush,
Yes.
Henry Susi,
Yes.
Charles Iovine.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the amended motion, and that will be the recommendation that we make. We'll include all those components now.
Okay. Council McDonald, does that address your issues or your questions on what we were voting on and how we could recommend disapproval with the same types of components?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It did, and then raised another question, because as I understand it, the amended motion that you just passed was based on the city solicitor's analysis rather than the planner's analysis. And the solicitor's analysis is based on legal risk, right? Like where our exposure is for litigation. And so can you just clarify, can this group clarify, is the basis for your recommendation that we consider amending other parts of the zoning code to address other business types? Is that based on your assessment of litigation risk, or is there a planning public interest based reason for wanting to require open space? I would think that would be different for schools because recess. But can you just help me understand what's the rationale then for including that additional piece?
Michelle, can you take a stab at helping Councilor McDonald?
I think that the city, I understand the city solicitor raised that as a concern with ordaining only open space requirements for this particular institutional use. So I think that that's valid. I think that's I wouldn't say it's a litigation concern, but I think if the city solicitor raises there's a legal issue or potential legal issue with an amendment, I think that is certainly appropriate for the board to consider. Would not, similar to on the site plan review, would not, it's not in anybody's interest, the city's interest, community's interest, public interest, to recommend something that is either known to be unlawful or we've been advised could be challenged as unlawful. I think that, I don't personally have an issue or professionally have an issue with that. I think that the board can take the city solicitor's opinion into consideration when it makes its recommendations. Again, it's a pretty broad standard for the review of zoning changes. So I don't have a problem with that you're using that as a basis. I think if the board just recommended outright disapproval, and then that leaves you with disapproval, they're trying to give you additional feedback. In essence, I think honestly, they are saying they would consider, they see some merit in the idea, in concept, even though they're not recommending approval. They're giving you recommendations for additional, I guess you'd call it research or additional review before you ordain anything. This is an advisory recommendation, so that is their prerogative, is to give you advice, to give you recommendations. And you either can follow them or, do what you want with them. We've seen many cases where the council takes the recommendation of the planning board verbatim, completely disregards it, follows it in part, follows it not in part, or doesn't follow it in part. So it's really, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, hopefully that helps you understand more what the decision is and how we arrived at it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And I just want to make sure I understand the basis for the advice you're providing so that we can take it seriously and take it into full account. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I believe that finishes the portion with the joint hearing with the City Council Ordinance Committee. I turn it over to Councilor Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so do I have a motion from the ordinance committee to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion.
Motion by Council Linehan, second by Council Sika. Councilor McDonald,
Yes.
Council Linehan,
Yes.
Council Sika,
Yes.
and I say yes. Thank you very much for your in-depth analysis of all that went on tonight.
Thank you very much, and I hope the ordinance committee has a good evening. We have a few
you.
more items still left on our agenda, so we're going to take a 2-minute break and then we will reconvene. Thank you very much. On our agenda, 140, 144 Eastern Avenue. Ken, if you could read the notice, that would be great. Is Ken there? Ken's not there.
We promoted him to panelist.
He's in attendees.
Yeah, we promoted him to panelist, but he's not. Okay, now he's raising his hand. So Ken, if you can hear us, you need to accept promote to panelist. You should be getting a message.
Yeah, I was still an attendee. I just got the invite to be a panelist, so I was here.
You just have to talk.
Yeah, you're not on mute anymore.
Oh my God, who's that guy? Hey, Tom.
Hi, Ken, how are you?
Good, you?
Good.
All right, so Chuck, am I reading this notice?
Please read the notice.
Okay, the Malden Planning Board will remotely hold a virtual public hearing at 7 PM on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, on the petition of Valtier Rosa of Minyarao Market LLC on behalf of Richard Gottschalk Jr., trustee of K&R Realty Trust, permit application number CMID 040423 of 2021, seeking to amend the special permit granted in case number 19-02 under Title 12, Chapter 12, Section 30 of the Code of the City of Malden, formerly known as Section 300.3.2.5, Chapter 12, Revised Ordinances of 1991, as amended of the City of Malden, to modify the approved plans and to allow outside storage, namely a walk-in freezer refrigerator for use by the existing retail sales market at the property known as and numbered 140 Eastern Ave, Malden, Mass., and also known by city assessors parcel ID number 086-269-904.
Thank you, Ken. Is the petitioner present or the petitioner's attorney?
Yes.
So whoever's going to give the presentation, if you give your name and address for the record.
Hi, good morning, good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I'm here on behalf of the petitioner. My address is 114 West Foster Street, Melrose. We're here seeking a petition to amend the special permit in case number 1902. We're asking to modify the approved plans to allow an outside storage unit, namely a walk-in cooler freezer for use by the existing retail market. The petitioner runs a very successful store, and as a result of this success, he needs additional storage and is requesting permission from this board to install a walk-in cooler at the rear of the property, as shown on the plans. The allowance of this petition will not cause any additional traffic impact or be detrimental to the area. This use is no greater than the current use. Petitioner is not seeking any other amendments. Petitioner believes the proposed amendment is in the interest of the common good, that the proposed amendment will not be detrimental to the neighborhood. The request is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Additionally, I spoke with the ward councilor and he has no objection. So the petitioner himself is here, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them best we can.
Yes, Council, I have a couple questions. How many actual spaces are being displaced?
Two.
Because I went by, and when I went by earlier this week, just about every parking spot in back was taken. I believe there were 2 open. And there was also several vehicles parked on the no parking striping and parked in other places where there's no parking allowed. And I'm curious how many spots we're gonna lose to this new freezer.
To my understanding, that'll be 2. The structure is 14 feet by about 22 feet. So there'll be 2. But I do believe we still meet all the parking requirements as imposed in the 1902 decision.
Now, does that 14 by 22 also include the AC units?
I believe so, yes.
Because it looks like, I mean, if this map is drawn to scale, it looks like there's 4 or 5 spots across the aisle taking up the same space.
Perhaps, Val, you could answer that a little better than I.
Are they?
Excuse me?
Yeah, if you have a picture of that.
He has a question.
That she thinks the AC units are already there.
Yes, they're already in a fenced area behind it.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
notice that when I drove in the back.
Yeah,
Um,
so these are the two. These are the 2 spots. This is the
Okay.
fenced in area.
and so then that's gonna remain, that's gonna attach to this new outdoor
No, that's a,
condenser.
that's a fenced in.
So are those AC units, I guess, Mr. Brennan, are the AC units associated with the proposed freezer?
No, the proposed freezer is a separate item.
Where would the condenser for the freezer be? Is that gonna be on top or inside?
Perhaps Val can answer it, but I believe it'll be on the, affixed to the unit itself.
Yes, will be built a shelf above the existing condensing unit. So no extra space will be needed because we're gonna build a shelf on top of the existing condensing unit and rearrange.
Excuse me, who's talking? Can you introduce yourself and your name and address for the record, please?
Valtier Rosa. I'm
Okay.
representing the Monero Market. I live at 30 Berry Street in North Andover.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm looking at your plan here. And I guess what I presumed when I looked at it, I saw the 22 by 15 freezer. And then to the left of that, I saw condenser area. So
Yes.
that's why I was thinking that the AC units that are on the plot plan were associated with the proposed freezer. Hello?
Yes, I hear you. I don't have, hold on, let me take a quick look to see if we are on the same page. Because I know based on, we have 2 options, but we're not gonna need any extra space for the condenser unit. Because one of the options that we have based on the refrigeration man is rearrange the existing condenser units, the one that you saw, and build a shelf above it so we can put the new unit. That's one option.
So in other words, there won't be any additional space taken. The condensers, the AC and the unit will be
At the same location,
incorporated
yes.
together.
Okay, so that exit door will go into the freezer now.
Correct.
And then there'll be another door on the freezer that will provide the egress.
Correct.
These are the 2 parking spaces.
Okay,
They're gonna stay through here, and this is their existing fence. See how they put it underneath? This is the house you put. The dotted lines.
okay, yes, I see. Okay, I see that now, yes. I didn't pick that up before. Yeah. Okay,
2 parking here, and then this is their door.
okay. Who can speak to all the cars that are on that on that lot. Because I seem to recall when we approved petitions before, that most of that, the parking in the back of that lot was for residential use.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could I ask you to ask everybody to mute if they're not currently talking?
Yeah, actually, we can mute them from here. Okay, looks like everyone's muted except for Attorney Brennan and me. Okay.
It's my understanding that at the original plan, there was a requirement that there be 9 parking spots for the residential units. And according to this plan, that there still is the 9 residential spots.
Okay, then let's see how many. Okay, so there's more than 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, because I guess when I was there, Mr. Brennan, there was a lot of activity with cars, and a lot of them parking in lined no parking areas and making up spots on their own, and they weren't all associated with the market. Some of them appeared to be with the tinting and operation that's there also, but it just seemed very chaotic and very difficult to move around the lot, and removing a couple parking spots is only going to make it worse.
Well, the area where the walk-in cooler is in a fenced-in area, and I can certainly encourage Val to speak to his neighbors, the abutters, and tell them to adhere to the parking rules.
Okay, presuming this goes through, how long will it take to install the freezer?
I better have Val answer that. I don't know exactly.
Well, excuse me, based on the current situation, it shouldn't take longer than, what, 2 months because of COVID, maybe 3 months max. Answering the question about the chaotic situation that you probably seen, we've been there for approximately 2 years now, a little over 2 years, and we haven't reported any accidents or anything that are on that sense, because we've been very cautious about that. We have cameras all over, and when we see that we have extra activities, we always have one of our employees outside attending, if need to, assist the people.
Okay. Mr. Rossi, can you describe a little bit about what you're using for freezer space right now?
Oh, we have a refrigerator unit inside, and it's limited. So based on the holidays, and special season, it gets really complicated inside the space. So this is why we need to really extra space on the outside.
Right. Do you intend to maintain the fridge that's inside?
No.
Can people mute if you're not speaking, please? There's a lot of feedback. Thank
Okay.
you. So Mr. Rosa, do
Yeah,
you plan on continuing to use the inside fridge?
no,
What's gonna become of that area?
well, that's the major problem we're having because the storage inside is small. It's half the size and it's not a freezer. So it's not being sufficient for us. So we have to
You've been
replace it
operating
with
for
the,
2 years and using it. What are you gonna do with that once you get the new freezer installed?
that will be an extra area for us to store stuff. Because if you look at the whole drawing, we don't have storage space in the store. And it's been really hard to work inside because of the limited space. So we're trying to gain space inside by adding the storage outside.
I guess which one of these numbers represents the inside fridge?
You have the drawing from the inside, the previous
Yes.
drawing?
I have a drawing of the butcher area.
Okay, the further to the right,
Number 36.
I honestly don't have what you have with me here. Because I only have the drawing from the outside on my hand.
Okay.
But it's the one to the right side. There's a box there. The right where the door, that's coming out to the walk-in cooler, to the new planned walk-in cooler. There's a box at the end of the butcher shop.
Okay.
If you visit the store inside, did you go inside?
I did.
Yeah. If you look inside,
it seemed kind of tight in there.
yeah, it's a fantastic operation. We're trying to keep it clean. We're trying to make everybody happy, but it's been very difficult with the limited space inside. So we're trying to find a way to make it better, more comfortable for everyone.
What's that?
I'm just talking, Mr. Chair, I did have in the folder the floor plan that was approved when the permit was issued, and there was an area, it was number 16, you can see it right on the edge of this plan. And it was for the walk-in freezer, a walk-in cooler. Do you want me to try to share this plan, yes, or not?
No, I was just more curious what was gonna become of that fridge.
Yeah,
Were they gonna
yeah.
continue using that fridge and this new
Yes.
proposed freezer?
Yes.
Or it sounds like they're going to remove this fridge and use it for more floor space.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, Mr. Rosa?
Yes, it is. And another factor that we've been talking about also is existing the deliveries that's happening at the store. They come in through the door and they have to go through the butcher shop to deliver to that box. And based on the new plan, when the delivery comes, which is a lot of deliveries, will be much more organized by being able to come and enter to the outdoor that you see on the new box, on the new walk-in cooler. So we are avoiding a lot of possibility for accidents inside also.
So deliveries will go directly to the freezer.
Directly to the freezer. Of course, the door will only open from the inside. There's no outside opening. So we're gonna have to give them access from the inside, but the drivers or anybody who comes to make deliveries will not be crossing within the customers and the employees.
No, that's good to know. Thank you. Okay, and so they'll, since this is used for the business, there won't be any additional headcount or staff that will be added?
No.
No, definitely not. We'll be much more organized if we do this.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for the petitioner or his attorney? Anyone have any questions? Michelle, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So I guess, is there anything else you would like to add, Attorney Brennan or Mr. Rosa?
Other than I spoke to Counselor Simonelli last week, and I explained to him, and I believe he paid a visit down there. And he informed me that he didn't have any objection. And but other than that, Val runs a nice little shop there, and he's been an asset to the community. I think I think he'll continue to be an asset for years to come. And I just request that you approve the petition.
I'll follow his words. And honestly, we've been there for 2 years. We really been working hard to keep a good relation with the neighbors, with the city, and with you guys. We're doing our best, and we'll continue to do our best. As you know, the owner of the property, Rick, is very cautious on making sure that everything is by the rules, and we are also the same way. So with that in mind, I would like you to please approve this petition that we've been waiting for a long time to do it the right way.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Michelle, you had another
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
question?
did just have one question, and I know the owner, Rick Godchuk, was on earlier. I'm not sure if he's still there, or Tom, Mr. Brennan, you can address it. What's the status, with the screening in the back? There was supposed to be screening. It looked like there was some torn vinyl on the fencing. But one of the conditions was that it be screened on the northern and eastern side. So it's a chain link fence, but there's no screening on it. So I did want to ask about that. And then I had one other question as well about the items being stored, a lot of milk crates and bread trays, and there was a lot of them being stored outside. Who do those belong to? Do they belong to the store, or what the status of those two things were?
I see Mr. Godchuk has his hand raised, so I will.
He's asking you to let him in, yeah.
Mr. Godchuk, name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Rick Gottschalk, 7 Nelson Way, Wilmington, Mass.
Okay.
Okay, as far as the screening, we did put up the screening. It may have fallen down during the snow. I'll make sure that we get that back up, but yes, we did put the screening up.
Okay, and was that just along the back that butts the U-Haul, or was that also on the chain link
No,
between
it was all,
Phillips and the property?
no, it was supposed to be just on the back, I believe.
Okay, so then we're gonna, when we get to that, we'll probably have to amend that condition, because it did say eastern side as well. But if that's not what's there, or if the board doesn't think that's important, we don't wanna have a condition that you're not meeting, or that if there's no need for it to have it there. Do you know who all the other stuff stored outside, who that belongs to, or?
As far as what?
There were milk, like dozens and dozens of milk crates, those black milk crates, the bread trays, a lot of items back there in that corner, the very corner of the lot.
I can answer that. I can answer that. The milk rates belong to the milk company. They supposedly deliver one batch and bring out the empty boxes. It could happen that when you got there, they either were to pick up, but they usually leave one and pick the other one up. That's what about the milk rate. And the other one is also the same position with the bread delivery, that they bring the boxes as way empty, but they supposedly pick up. Unfortunately, as you know, the situation right now, with everybody being shorthanded, sometimes they will stay a little longer than they should, but it's not supposed to be there, and we work our best not to keep them there.
Okay, but there's no place inside the store to store that type of stuff?
Based on the removing of that box inside, things like they should be better organized. And it's good that you're mentioning, because sometimes we don't pay enough attention, and we'll certainly do it after this.
Okay, then my last question just had to do with the deliveries. When I was there, a truck came in through the parking lot and then ended up coming through that gate and pulled into Phillips Court and was unloading there. So, you know, pulled the ramp down and was unloading, then walking back into the fenced area. Then another truck pulled up and kind of went partially into the fenced area. And then, of course, the snow, the day I was there was before the storm, so there was a lot of the snow removal trucks coming in and out of Mr. Godchuk's other property on the other side of Phillips Court. So where do deliveries normally happen? Do they pull into the back lot, or are they pulling into Phillips Court, or is it mixed, or can you speak to that?
Most 80% of the time is Phillips Court, but as you just mentioned, based on this week's storm and snow, it's been a little confusing, complicated, because there's not a lot of space around. But usually we try to make the deliveries on the earlier side of the day, because there's not a lot of business. It's a quiet part of the day by noontime. So we try to do it on the earlier side, and we try to keep it on the Phillips Court, away from the cars, away. Always, this is why you saw it's next to the fence by the trash area, to try to avoid staying close to the cars that's parked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for the petitioners? Anyone else have any questions? Okay, is there anything else you guys want to add for the presentation?
I just want to close thanking you all for your time. It's a late time, and I appreciate your timing with us.
Thank you very much. So at this point, we'll entertain anyone that is interested in speaking in favor of this petition. Anyone in favor? Michelle, do you have anything to read in favor?
Yes, I do. I have one letter dated February 9th, 2022. It reads, Dear Mr. Iovan and Planning Board members, I apologize I will not be able to attend the meeting tonight. However, I'm asking that the following letter be read into the record in support of the petition of Valtier Rosa of Mineral Market, LLC, to amend the special permit granted in case 1902. It references the description to modify the approved plans and to allow outside storage, namely a walk-in freezer for refrigerator for use by the existing sales market at 140 Eastern Avenue. It reads, as Ward 7 Council, I would like to go on record in full support of this petition, subject to all conditions brought forward by the Planning Board. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Respectfully submitted, Christopher Simonelli, Council of Ward 7.
Thank you, Michelle. Nothing else to read in favor, and no one's looking to speak in favor. I declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Anyone in opposition? Okay, seeing none. Michelle, do you have anything to read in opposition?
No, nothing.
Okay, seeing and hearing none, declare that part of the hearing closed. Michelle, could you take us through your staff report and recommendation, please?
Yes, so the property is the site of a two-story building, located on the northern side of Eastern Avenue. It's opposite Phillips Street, near the intersection of Ferry Street, Eastern Avenue. It's currently occupied for multifamily residential dwelling use by 6 dwelling units on the second floor, 5 with 2 bedrooms, 1 with 1 bedroom. For retail services used by a window tinting business that occupies 3,000 square feet, and for the retail sales used by the food market grocery store with deli and butcher, 3,000 square feet on the first floor. That is the petitioner. So the petitioner is the tenant and operator of this food market. They have current permits from the Board of Health and License Board. There is no food served for eating or seating on the premises, so they just have the food, retail food sales licenses and permits. Also a dumpster permit. As you heard, the petition seeks to amend the special permit. You have a copy of that, case 1902. Originally, we did think it was to amend, condition 1, which is all development shall be as per plans, except as modified by these conditions. The floor plan may only be revised subject to Board of Health approval. And then condition 8, which is no outside storage allowed. You heard the proposal is to install a walk-in freezer refrigerator, approximately 15 by 22 feet, 330 square feet in size. It will be for use by the food market. We located the rear of the building in the current location of 2 parking spots in the existing parking area. Access to the freezer will be through the food market premises. Since the filing of the petition, the building commissioner determined that this walk-in freezer is actually an extension of the existing building. It increases the gross floor area of the building and premises occupied for retail sales. So it's actually not outside storage. It actually will become part of the building, be attached to the building. This determination is based on the fact that the freezer is not a temporary structure. It is not used independently of the principal building. It is accessible from the interior of the building, and the existing exterior door is being removed and replaced with an interior mounted refrigeration door. So we have that opinion from Nelson Miller, the building commissioner. You have the plan submitted with the petition, the floor plan, which is a partial floor plan. It depicts the refrigerator freezer connected to the market. You also have the site plan, shows the parking layout. The property is located in the central business zoning district. The existing multifamily use is allowed by special permit in the district. It was allowed by special permit granted in case 15-10, which reinstated the rights that lapsed, authorized by the special permit granted in case 13-23. The existing retail services use is allowed by right in central business zoning. The retail sales use is allowed by right in general, but it was prohibited at this property as part of the special permit granted in case 13-23. It was then allowed by special permit granted in case 19-02. The direct abutter to the north and west is a self-storage facility. To the east, on the other side of Phillips Court, the property owner's landscaping business, which is considered building construction contracting. To the south, on the other side of Eastern Avenue, a motor vehicle repair shop and retail auto sales business. And the highway business zoning district begins. Surrounding land use is a business, including a pharmacy with drive-through, residential, including a multifamily dwelling with 86 units, Malden High School, and the abandoned railroad right-of-way used in part for the public multimodal recreational trail, Bike to the Sea Northern Strand Community Trail. The existing building was constructed by right in 2006, conforms to all applicable dimensional controls. The proposal creates no violations or nonconformities. In terms of parking requirements, 9 on-site off-street parking spaces are required for the residential use under applicable requirements. That's 1.5 spaces per unit. Because the residential use is pre-existing non-conforming, it's exempt from the current requirements to provide 1 space per bedroom. No parking or loading is required for the retail services or the retail uses, sales uses, because allowed non-residential uses in the central business zoning district are exempt. The site plan submitted with the petition depicts 16 parking spaces configured as head-on in the parking lot located behind the building. The required residential parking is located on the western side of the parking lot. It is separated from access via Phillips Court by fencing with an emergency gate, with access and egress via the driveway up Eastern Avenue at the southwestern corner of the lot. That complies with condition 2 of the special permit in case 1902. Parking for business uses, as I said, are not required, but it is provided. There are 6 spaces behind the building and 11 located partially on site and in Phillips Court, on the eastern side of the parking lot with access via Phillips Court. The property is the subject of variances regarding parking layout. One was granted in May 19, 2016 for non-conforming widths of the parking aisle and access driveway, egress driveway, and the second was granted on September 18, 2019 as a modification of the 2016 variance, the vehicles backing out into street or way. So those are the ones you see on the plan that are lined up on Phillips Court. The parking layout is considered to comply with zoning ordinances and the special permit conditions through these variances that were granted. I mentioned the concerns that I saw during the site visit that violate the conditions of the special permit. One has to do with the outside storage, the milk crates, etc., that was stacked up, and the other has to do with the screening of parking. Findings you must make to modify or grant the special permit. You must find that any creation or increase in violation of dimensional controls or parking requirements will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood, and that the proposal is in the interest of the common good. Do you want me to go ahead with
Yes,
the
please.
recommendation? The recommendation is that the special permit be granted. The special permit granted in case 1902 be modified, and a special permit be granted, a new special permit be granted, subject to the following conditions. 1, all development shall be as per plans, except as modified by these conditions. Floor plan may only be revised subject to Board of Health approval. 2, 9 parking spaces shall be provided on site for use of residential tenants only. Residential access only via Eastern Avenue, no access via Phillips Court, maintain gated fence. Screen with privacy fencing, and I will change this to say along the northern side. The eastern side is not. So the side of the gate between Phillips Court and the parking lot is a low black chain link fence. There's no screening there, and unless the board thinks we should have it, I would recommend you remove that since it's not there. The screening requirement came from the screening of the residential use. The ordinance requires screening of the residential use from abutting businesses. The parking layout must conform to section or title 12.12.020 of the zoning ordinance. It shall be maintained as depicted on the site plan submitted to the city. No parking is allowed in the driveway. 3, the first floor may only be occupied for general offices, including corporate administrative offices of a contractor, retail services, retail sales less than 5,000 square feet, and or artist live workspace. Convenience store, supermarket, restaurant, any other use is prohibited. 4, dumpsters are prohibited unless cited and screened by title 12.20 of the ordinance and in accordance with Board of Health regulations. 5, maintain landscaped front yard. 6, repair, replace sidewalks, including related incidental work around the perimeter of the site to the reasonable satisfaction of the DPW director. 7, maintain bicycle parking for 3 bikes. 8, no off-site storage is allowed. 9, the sale of alcohol, tobacco, vapor products, and accessories and lotteries prohibited. 10, bakery may only be accessory to a food market. And 11, any live kill or slaughter is prohibited. Then 12 is the walk-in freezer refrigerator shall be for the use of the retail sales market, size and location as per plans.
Okay, so which one did you modify and say we do?
Well, I'm proposing that you modify condition 2 that has to do, the part that has to do with screening with privacy fencing. So the northern property line is the one that abuts the U-Haul. That's where the screening looked like it was ripped and torn. The black vinyl looked like inserts into the, or a black vinyl.
Right, but what are you proposing?
I'm
that should
proposing
read?
you remove the word "and eastern." So the eastern side is the part of the gate that faces Phillips Court. There's no screening there now, and apparently there has never been. I'm thinking maybe to remove it, the residential parking is further back anyway, and
Okay,
the
so,
day I was there, the deliveries were, actively coming in and out. I'm not sure the screening,
so just leave northern side.
right, just leave northern side.
Okay,
Unless, the board thinks it's important to.
okay. Does anyone have any other questions? Anyone have any questions for Michelle? I don't see anyone with any questions. Is there a motion then? Ken Antonucci,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept planning's recommendation with the modification.
okay, so Michelle, that would be recommendation staff with the modification removing eastern side.
Right, so to grant a special permit with those 12 conditions,
Yes. And the modification of removing the reference to the eastern side screening.
okay?
Okay, is there a second, Henry Susi?
I second that motion.
Very good, Henry seconds it.
Want me to do the roll
If you
call?
could do the roll call, please.
Ken Antonucci,
Yes.
Diane Schumach.
Yes.
Patrick Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Tawana Selassie,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Eric Henry,
Yes.
Eric McCush,
Yes.
Henry Susi,
Yes.
Chuck Iovine.
Yes, the petition has been granted with conditions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with it.
All right, good night.
Thank you. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is that. The next item on the agenda is public meeting advisory recommendation of city council, special permits, 36 Charles Street.
Yes, we just, we're not making the recommendation or reviewing that tonight. We just received additional required plans this afternoon, so they're under review by Nelson Miller and myself, so we will hopefully
Review them
we will hopefully be
meeting.
able to make the recommendation at the next meeting.
Okay, and then,
So
Eric-
up until today, the application was still incomplete, so.
right, okay, and Eric Henry, do you have any updates for the Community Preservation Committee?
Yes, second at that community preservation meeting, and we'll meet again next Wednesday. We got a couple very interesting projects in the pipeline there. I can't note of one. I think this is piece. It was notable because it's the first time it came up, but the city had an opportunity to buy back a parcel of land to preserve it for future use. And so those sort of things are starting to come up. There's not a lot of free land or open spaces in Malden, but when those come up, that was an interesting thing, the prospect of us having the potential for buying back property. So yeah, a lot of talk about trees in Deaver Park. And unless we have any specific questions, that's pretty much it.
No, thank you very much. I don't see anyone with their I see someone's hand raised. Who was that? Ken Antonucci? Did you have a question for Eric on his report out?
No, that was leftover hand raise.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Well, very good.
I just wanted to raise my hand and say thank you to Eric again.
Yeah, you just
Okay.
like to see me sweat.
Very good. The next meeting will be Wednesday, March 9th. And that is going to be an in-person meeting. The mayor last week lifted the ban on in-person meetings.
Yeah, effective Monday, this Monday. right.
Effective this past Monday.
Right, this week, right,
Right, so 2 days ago, the
Right.
7th of February.
right.
So come March 9th, we will expect everyone to be here at City Hall and both board members and petitioners. So, hope everyone's staying happy and healthy out there. And thank you very much for your participation this evening. And if there's nothing more, Michelle, do you have anything more?
No?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
Ken made motion, second.
I'll second.
Diane seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Have a good evening, everyone.
See you all next month.
Yeah.